Our next storyteller is Lara Lawson. Lara is a native of Milton, West Virginia. She has a master's in sociology from Marshall University, and she works as a development director for Recovery Point in West Virginia. She's married to Zach Lawson and mom to Zeta. Please welcome Lara Lawson.
This is called dramatic visioning. My manic episodes are full of great ideas. I even have the confidence that I can achieve them. It's just impossible to function when you aren't sleeping or going to work or capable of sustained concentration. In my last episode, I created a fundraising page to fight the overdose epidemic. The plan lacked strategy, but it wasn't without passion. I went to the hospital early one morning to meet someone who had just fallen victim to an overdose. I convinced him to go to treatment. My mania shows me the future. The one thing I could focus on was social media. It's always awake. You can talk directly at famous people and they might hear you. I got a response from a famous social justice organizer, and I told my mother I was going to work for Black Lives Matter. She didn't believe me. I was drifting further from reality every day, and she's seen my manic episodes before. I feel like I can control it until the ideas grow too big, too fast, and too wrong, and then I can't. My last manic episode was dramatic, like a movie. There was a high-speed chase, an arrest, a perp walk, and soliloquies from a jail cell. There was a locked-ward mental hospital. The hospital was better than jail, with rubber furniture bolted to the floor. The days passed in group sessions and outdoor recreation in an AstroTurf courtyard. It was called the Pink Castle by the folks in jail, but it was not a castle at all. It was full of thick glass walls for constant observation and institutional color schemes. The only natural things to touch were the leaves and sticks that flew into the courtyard after a storm, or perhaps that a bird dropped. I always picked up whatever leaf or tiny stick I could find to hold it and feel connected to the world outside of the locked ward. At mealtimes, every patient watched the groundhogs or peaceful deer walk across the field outside the window. I envied their freedom. The cast of characters included quiet, humble old men who had spent years inside those walls, occasionally screaming women in an isolation room, people who couldn't quite keep stable regardless of interventions. One person who had the habit of eating inedible objects. One who was rumored to be dangerous, but only gave me lovely colored drawings, and others who seemed like anyone you would meet on the street. There was little to do. I read the books Unbroken and Paper Towns, and listened to an old iPod while walking laps through the long halls. I got notebooks and awful ballpoint safety pins to write sometimes. I filled 2 or 3 of them with who knows what. Finally, I was deemed competent to face a judge for my crime again after nearly 2 months. I had to return to jail and spend a week with the pre-trial felon population. Luckily, I had street cred for being the girl who led a high-speed car chase in her bathing suit. I went home on confinement to keep on picking up the pieces of my life. I received unemployment because I was fired from my job. I spent 6 months applying to everything. I interviewed and I got nothing. My unemployment ran out and I ran to the last resort, the local McDonald's. I wore the uniform and served customers for 30 hours a week. I found purpose and worth within myself again. And then I found a good job prospect with an addiction recovery organization I respected. I interviewed, nailed it, and took the offer. As I worked on something I cared about, my mental health stabilized. Work and purpose are essential to my recovery. I loved my work, and it helped me to help others. Then a higher position opened. I applied, I interviewed, nailed it, and accepted the challenge. The day after the nation was rocked by an outbreak of 26 overdoses in Huntington. I had gotten my dream job, fundraising to stop the overdose epidemic. My mania shows me the future. I didn't start owning my story until the feeling that everything would be snatched away started to subside. When I shared my story with my boss, he encouraged me to share it more. It's amazing to work where mental health is taken seriously and second chances are real. In the winter, I went to the state capitol with a bunch of women waving signs asking for their own second chances. The Second Chance for Employment Act passed in the final moments of the legislative session. Later in the year, I was invited to be on the interim board for the Call to Action for Racial Equality. I helped organize a Black Lives Matter rally at the state capitol on August 20th that united 500 people fighting for racial justice. My mania shows me the future. My mania in jail was its own story, and I'm cursed to remember most of it. My psychosis was out of control, and I experienced many visions. I imagined there was a massive flood coming. The day of my arrest was June 23rd, 2015. On June 23rd, 2016, West Virginia saw a 1,000-year flood. I imagined that if we all focused and tried hard enough that we could raise my friends who have died from overdoses from the dead. And although they are long buried, through my job, I get to know people who have been revived and go on to live in recovery. I imagined organizing a big concert, and now I'm working with a group to put on a big concert to raise funds to help communities overcome the substance use disorder epidemic called Hope in the Hills. My mania shows me the future. I am living a recovery that is my destiny. No one will convince me that this was a coincidence. Thanks to my psychiatrist, a great therapist, peer support, religiously taking my medication, a supportive employer, total abstinence from drugs and alcohol, my family and my friends, I am making my dramatic visions come to life. Mania is dangerous, but it made me fearless. I share my story with you in hopes that you might find your own path to fearlessness. I don't recommend anyone seek it in the way that I stumbled onto it, because I am lucky to have lived through this. But I want the millions of people with mental illnesses to find recovery and be the person they are meant to be. I want you to know that recovery is possible. I want you to be brave and imagine the world that we can make together, and let's make it.
Lara, that was such a powerful story of recovery. We thank you so much for sharing that.